Dr. Anthony Harper here, blessed to be with MK Simcha Rothman. Very important issues that are being dealt with here. And thank you, MK Rothman, for joining me. And for our listeners, our viewers, explain about your role with your party is called
Religious Zionist Party.
Okay, what is your role with the Religious Zionist Party?
So I'm a Knesset member. I am number 4 on the list for last Knesset, number 4 also for next Knesset, but we joined forces with another party. I'm a candidate, and Bezat Hashem, I will serve also in the next Knesset on behalf of the party.
Okay, what is at stake? What do you see the big issues for you and your party and the Knesset in general?
So usually I would say the Religious Zionist Party is about the Jewish identity of the State of Israel. It's about the security issues. We're considered on the right wing also economically in Israel. But I think the last year and a half showed that the main issue is how do we treat the existential threat on the State of Israel that comes from terror-supporting parties that are within the Israeli Knesset. Sadly, the current administration was formed based on a coalition with those parties. Ram party is the part of the bigger Muslim Brotherhood, which is in the countries that surrounds us. Most of the sister movements are designated terrorist organizations. In Israel, they are in the Knesset, they are in the government, and the policy that this current administration was enforcing based on those coalition members endangers Israel. So we have to change it as soon as possible.
Okay. I forgot to mention that I'm in the Knesset building actually with in MK Rothman's office here, a very special place here at the Knesset to visit here. But regarding the Knesset concerns, we have an election coming up in November. Concerns or issues that you would like to talk about the election?
So we need to make sure, that we will be able to form a right-wing government. In Israel, it's a coalition system. It's not like the U.S. It's not we don't elect directly the prime minister. We elect parties, and the prime minister is the one who forms a 61 majority. So the major goal is to get 61 members of the Knesset to support the right-wing coalition and the right-wing government. The challenges that are facing us are the challenges that are facing the State of Israel. We know what's happening with Iran, we know what's happening with the surrounding countries, and we know what's happening with the Palestinian issues. We have currently, sadly, the equivalent of the Taylor Force Act in the U.S. We have it in Israel, but this current administration, the current government in the State of Israel, disregards it. We pay from Israeli taxpayer money. We pay for terrorists' salaries. So we need to stop it as soon as possible. It's also about security, but it's also about morals, and we want the State of Israel not to pay for terrorists.
Well, we have a similar problem in the White House. Actually, the Biden administration, they seem to be ignoring the Taylor Force Act as well. So there's some serious issues about somehow terrorism is getting funded.
That's a major issue all around the world, because people, when they say they talk the talk, but they do not walk the walk. You pass all those laws, and people say no, we are objecting to terror. But when you check the facts, we see what's happening on the ground. You see that terror is being supported by countries, by organizations, by international organizations, by the EU, by governments in Europe. And again, sadly, and through weird ways to transfer the money, also by the Israeli government and by the U.S. government.
Along with that, I just think about in the U.S. about the funding going, somehow money getting to the Palestinian Authority, and somehow money is getting to the Palestinian Authority here as well.
Yes, and it's also, again, it's also paying salaries, what you would call pay for slay, but it's also it's paying for the education
Mm-hmm.
and for the school system,
Like UNRWA.
like UNRWA and other organizations and the Palestinian Authority curriculum that basically tells the young children you treats terrorists as heroes, and you can't expect children that learn from day one, from age zero, that the terrorist is a hero, to object to terror, to not become terrorists themselves. So if we want this cycle of blood to stop, we have to stop the funding of terror.
And stop the funding of UNRWA as well.
Of course, UNRWA schools are not promoting peace in the Middle East; they're promoting terror.
Okay. Well, what would be your main concern about what's happening in the Biden administration regarding Iran? Serious issues.
I think that the Biden administration concerning Iran, and you can say largely concerning the world, but let's take Iran for example. The message that comes from Biden administration to Iran and to the other bullies of the world is, do whatever you want. We will not do anything. We will not attack you. We will not sanction you. We will just let you do whatever you want, and we will throw our friends, our allies, under the bus. We are not, and we're not talking just about Israel. We're talking about Saudi Arabia, the Emirates.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about all the nations of the world that for many years counted on the U.S. To be their ally, and suddenly they get nothing. And I think also the same thing happened with Ukraine. If the U.S. administration would say would send the right message to Putin, Ukraine will not be invaded, and this message of weakness just brings all the bullies of the world to come and attack their neighbors.
Very complicating situations. You think about Russia, what has been happening, and what happened with President Trump. Russia was not invading other countries, to my knowledge.
Yeah, so and it's also Russia and all other when the United States shows reflects the power. This is a superpower. It doesn't the U.S. does not need to send troops to attack. They just need to make the claim or even hint that if there will be an attack, there will be a response, and most countries will just back off. Back out. You don't need to send American soldiers to war. You just need to send a carrier to the area, and everyone understands the message. And once the U.S. says, okay, we are backing off, the bullies of the world just rise and attack American allies, and that brings more weakness for the U.S. If the U.S. allies are being attacked, then the U.S. is attacked.
Yes. Besides the Iran situation and the Biden administration regarding Iran, is maybe for a lot of people concerned about emboldening Iran with having deals with Iran. Any other concerns about the current White House policies that are impacting Israel?
So again, they're also concerning the inner issues. We just recently heard the administration, the State Department, trying to tell Israel what is the right ways or the rules of engagement in Judea and Samaria. That's not for the U.S. to decide. It's the engagement. The rules of engagement in Judea and Samaria are meant to protect Israel. And we don't try to tell any other country around the world, especially not the U.S., but how to defend their citizens and how to defend their soldiers. And we shouldn't get this treatment from anyone, especially not from our friend and ally, the U.S. And I think that those messages send the wrong message. I don't think that Biden and the administration or the Democrats in Congress want to send this message that the U.S. does not treat their allies in a respectful way, but some people can get the wrong message, and I don't think it's healthy for the world.
No, I understand. There's other forms of anti-Semitism, of course, BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israeli products. But also, have you been dealing with? You've been aware of the desecration of Jewish cemeteries, especially in Vilnius, Lithuania, and elsewhere.
I heard about it. Sadly, we see acts of anti-Semitism also in Israel. We see just a year and a half ago we saw shuls, synagogues in Lod and other places in Israel being torched by mob. That the only reason is anti-Semitism. It was like a riot of anti-Semitism by the Arab population in the mixed cities in Israel. We're facing the modern anti-Semitism all around the world, and they target Jewish targets and Israeli targets. The anti-Semitism does not make the difference between Jews and the state of Israel, and we should not make this definition for them. They attack Israel because they see Israel as the Jewish homeland. They do not attack Israel because it's just another state in the Middle East that they don't agree with its policies.
Mm-hmm. Well, anything finally you would like to share with our audience?
I think that anyone who is the pasuk says Sha'alu Shlom Yerushalayim Yishlayu Avayich. Anyone who seeks the peace for Jerusalem, he will be at peace himself. And I think that our friends in the U.S. and all around the world, but especially in the U.S., that seek the peace for Jerusalem, I think they can see it. They can see that this movement from all around the world, focusing on the state of Israel, focusing on Jerusalem and what's happening here, the interest that those issues bring all around the world shows us that there is something special here, and anyone who connects with Jerusalem is connected to the peace of the world.
But I can also think finally about the two-state. We hear this in the news: two-state solution. How does having a Palestinian state in the heartland of Israel impact Israel's security?
So, two-state solution is a term that there is not a single word in the term that is true. It's not two, it's not states, it's definitely not a solution. It's not two because we already talk about at least three states, because we have Gaza, it's a separate entity, and we have the Judean Samaria, the Palestinian Authority, and we have Israel. It's not two, it's definitely more than two. Are not state because wherever the state of Israel does not control the land, there is no state. It's a failed state. Again, see what's happening in Gaza, see what's happening in the Palestinian Authority, and actually see what's going on all around in the Middle East. Syria is not really a state, it's a failed state. Lebanon, it's not a state, it's a failed state. Jordan is holding up only because the help from the U.S. and from Israel, from other direction. Egypt, the same way, and also cannot control what's happening in Sinai. So we don't really have stable states in the area unless Israel is controlled or involved in this. So it's not a state, and it's definitely not a solution, because we see what's happening in Gaza, we see what's happening in Syria and Lebanon. Everywhere it's not under Israeli control, we see missiles coming from there, we see terror attacks coming from there, and we see the population, the Arab population in those areas suffering. So anyone who looks for a real solution in the area need to understand that Israel needs to have the security control on the land. Otherwise, we want to have not a state, not a solution, definitely not two.
There's been a real push by the current administration, the White House, pushing for dividing up Israel with a Palestinian state. And I was just curious about how that has been accepted. The Knesset, most of the Knesset people, not really interested in dividing Israel with this.
I think today no one almost, besides the far left, no one in Israel thinks that dividing the land of Israel is a viable solution for the state of Israel or for its neighbors.
Very troublesome, what is going on about the rise of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and many other places. And thank you for your role here it's very important, and we've been encouraging people to pray for Israel, for the peace of Jerusalem. What you were just saying earlier about related to the blessings for those that bless Israel, it comes out of Genesis 12:3. And there are blessings for those that bless Israel and praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Definitely.
And thank you for
Thank you.
all your help here and your role here. We pray that you'll have wonderful election results coming out in November.
Thank you, Bezrat Hashem.
That will
Thank you
help
very
Israel.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be with you all.